Namaskar, dear viewers. In this lesson, we shall try to discuss role of judicial activism in administration of justice. As all of us know that judiciary plays a vital role in administration of justice, and it ensures constitutional governance. When we look at the constitutional perspectives in India, we find that the judiciary is well placed to ensure that justice is secured in all aspects relating to the administration and also to the citizens. And the constitutional governance can be ensured through various means like the rule of law, then by at least making a sincere effort to follow the doctrine of separation of powers, by upholding the supremacy of the constitution, by ensuring that the governance is limited by the constitution, and ultimately in keeping the three organs of the state, namely the legislature, executive and judiciary, within their constitutional boundaries. All this can be done mostly with the help of the power of judicial review. So, judicial review power, which is a species of judicial power itself, is the genus as far as the judicial activism is concerned. First, let us understand what exactly is the concept of judicial activism. Let us remember that the judges in India are not elected. Judiciary is an undemocratic institution, and still the higher judiciary is given the responsibility of checking the exercise of legislative power as well as the administrative power, and with the power to strike down the validity of any legislative or administrative action if it contravenes any provision of the constitution. This is because the constitution is supreme. Let us have a look at the traditional role of the judiciary anywhere in the world. The judiciary is not meant to be active. The judiciary is meant to focus its attention on adjudication, that is, resolving the disputes brought before it. Of course, depending on the kind of the legal system prevalent in the given country, whether the judiciary plays the role of an activist or restraintivist depends. But the primary role of the judiciary is to determine the cases and controversies, to resolve the lists or litigation which is brought before the courts, that is in adversarial system which is followed in many countries in the world including India. Then doctrine of separation of powers also contemplates that one organ of the state should not in fact interfere with the functioning of the other organs of the state. Whatever Montesquieu predicted or contemplated in his famous book Spirit of Laws may not be practically possible, but nonetheless separation of powers has been kept as some kind of utopian concept, because in modern times, especially when we have a welfare state, it is not possible to keep all the three organs of the state in separate watertight compartments. Maybe the better way of in fact understanding the transformation of separation of powers in modern times is to understand the concept of checks and balances as propounded by James Madison of United States of America. Purpose is to maintain constitutional equilibrium between the legislature, executive and the judiciary. one cannot lose sight of the contribution of the great judge John Marshall in the famous case of Marbury versus Madison, decided by the US Supreme Court in the year 1803, where the learned judge emphatically declared that it is the province of the judiciary to state what the law is and to uphold supremacy of the constitution is the duty of the judiciary. So, ultimately it is the province of the judiciary, it is the duty of the judiciary to uphold the supremacy of the constitution. Today we can call it constitutionalism or whatever. People say that probably this was the beginning of judicial activism in modern times, though no in fact scientific study has been made on this. But one has to remember the judicial statesmanship of John Marshall, how he used an implicit power, not an explicit power, a self assumed power to forego a small advantage, but for the purpose of gaining a greater power to the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court of USA, the power of judicial review, which will enable the courts to strike down the validity of a law on the touchstone of the constitution. Then let us try to understand the meaning of judicial activism. As I already mentioned, it is a species of judicial power, and it is a particular way of exercising the judicial power by the courts and judges. In fact, of the three organs of the state, we say that legislature and executive are political organs, whereas judiciary is a non-political organ. But if the judiciary encroaches upon the traditional jurisdiction of legislature and executive, you can call it the judicial activism. If it is going beyond the judicial interpretation, if it is resulting in judicial legislation or judicial policy making or judicial adventurism, this is one aspect. You can say that it is nothing but assertion and expansive use of judicial power for a variety of purposes, and whatever is done by the judges and courts, it is done in the name of constitutionalism and its preservation. They say that whatever direction is given, whatever guidelines are framed, whatever policies are formulated by the judiciary beyond its purview, it is only for the purpose of the upholding of the supremacy of the constitution. Some researchers say that judicial activism denotes omnipresence of the judiciary. Judiciary feels that there is no area which cannot be touched by the judiciary, which cannot be reviewed by the judiciary. Omnipresence, presence everywhere. Judiciary might say that it is a kind of sarvantaryami. Second meaning is that it is omnipotence of judicial power. The thinking that with the judicial power everything can be done. So, judiciary is competent to do everything, to give any kind of direction or order or judgment. That is also kind of judicial activism, and Americans call it the political role played by the judiciary. So, ultimately it so happens that when there is legislative abdication of powers, executive abdication of powers, then the judiciary crosses its Lakshman Rekha. Then ultimately it does those things which are supposed to be done by the political organs by itself. You can call it judicial activism. But the ground on which judiciary becomes active is found to be the abdication of the powers and responsibilities by the legislature and executive. Now, let us try to understand the reasons for growth of judicial activism. What exactly are the reasons? Why the judges become active? Why the courts become active? The reasons are many. I mentioned already that there may be abdication of powers by political organs of the state. That means, if a law is badly required to be made by the state, but it is not made, there is a legislative vacuum, then the judiciary might step in. It might say that we are filling the vacuum with our own guidelines, with our own policy until you make the law. It happened in the case of Vishaka versus state of Rajasthan. For almost 16 years, there was no law on the sexual harassment of working women in India. It was only the guidelines made by the Supreme Court under Article 141 of the Constitution which occupied the field for a lengthy period of 16 years. So, this is one classic example. Same is the case with the executive. When the executive fails, what should be done? Take for instance, when there has been indiscriminate mining of iron ore and other materials in various parts of the country, with the active collusion between the executive and the private sector, so on and so forth, it was the judiciary which stepped in, ultimately which appointed a highly empowered committee and which started scrutinizing the licenses or considering whether there is necessity of renewing the license, so on and so forth. So, when there is an abdication of powers by the political organs of the state, judicial activism emerges. The second reason is judicial review. The power of judicial review, which is in fact now considered as a basic feature of the Constitution, which is exercised by the constitutional courts like the Supreme Court and High Courts, gives such courts ample opportunity to become more active in their exercise of the jurisdiction as well as powers. Third one is advent of democracy. In modern times, democracy is understood as the government of the people, by the people and for the people. If that is the case, so how this judiciary is supposed to be silent spectator? They think that they are equal partners in the process of democracy. Therefore, they try to in fact fulfill the aspirations of the citizens and others by becoming more and more active. The fourth reason is the constitutional mandate. The Constitution under Article 32 designates the Supreme Court as the guardian of fundamental rights. Under Article 141, it gives finality to the orders given by the Supreme Court. And similarly, under Article 226, High Court also can be the guardian of fundamental rights. So, there is enough leverage and flexibility for the higher courts in India given by the Constitution to become active. Another very important reason for judicial activism, which has been witnessed only after 1980s, consistently, though sporadically there was some kind of activism exhibited by judges like Justice Koka Subba Rao or Justice Gajendra Gadkar and Justice Shah in 1970s or H.R. Khanna to some extent. But after 1980s, judicial activism has become more and more consistent. One has to remember the judgment of Justice Subba Rao in Golaknath versus state of Punjab, where he gave paramountcy to fundamental rights under the Constitution of India. Justice V. R. Krishna Iyer, the people's judge, Justice P. N. Bhagwati, the human rights champion, Justice Kuldeep Singh, the judge who gave altogether a new dimension to the concept of environmental jurisprudence in India. In fact, it is their contribution, their in fact active nature which resulted in judicial activism to a great extent. Similarly, there are other active players. There may be activist lawyers. For example, there may be persons like Nani Palkiwala or H. M. Sirvai or Ram Jethmalani or Bihari Salve, maybe many more. Similarly, there are number of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, whether it is the Bandhuva Mukti Morcha or People's Union for Democratic Rights or Common Cause or People's Union for Civil Liberties. There are many. Then similarly, there are number of individuals with public spirit. MC Mehta, I think without mentioning his name, nobody can understand the judicial activism in environmental protection in India. And there are many more like Rural Litigation and Entitlement Kendra, Dehradun, Consumer Education Rights Society, and one can give a long list of such organizations. So, it is the active individuals, active players. Then another point is very important. Today the judges, they think that they can't remain silent spectators when something wrong is going on in the society. Therefore, when their attention is drawn, they feel that they also owe a duty towards the public. Therefore, they use the flexibility given by the constitution and they try to give the timely and necessary judgments, orders and directions even by crossing their jurisdiction, by exceeding their jurisdiction, but for a good purpose. And last point is this: weak and unstable governments sometimes make the judiciary stronger. We have seen it, during Janata period or subsequent to that, especially when there are coalition governments, certainly the judiciary becomes emboldened to give more and more active decisions, especially when the governments are weak. Now, I will come to the notable forms of judicial activism in India. Of course, the nomenclature might vary. Public interest litigation, Professor Upendra Bakshi says that it is not public interest litigation, it is social action litigation. Whatever which has been a judge led and judge induced mechanism in alleviating the problems of unrepresented sections of the society, be it poor, illiterate, ignorant or technically in fact restricted. All these people, they have become beneficiaries of public interest litigation. This is the best known or the most conspicuous form of judicial activism. Expansion of the fundamental rights in part 3 of the constitution, especially as part of right to life and personal liberty under article 21 of the constitution, especially after 1978 when the Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India in fact created new horizons of life and personal liberty. Today, I think there are any number of implicit fundamental rights, including right to health, right to education, right to work, right to livelihood, then right to privacy. Supreme Court has recently mentioned that right to privacy is also part of right to life and personal liberty. This is another form. Similarly, directive principles of state policy are not in fact enforceable in a court of law, but the Supreme Court, by exhibiting its judicial activism in a number of cases, read the spirit of many directive principles as part of the specifically guaranteed fundamental rights. So, by reading directive principles as part of the fundamental rights like right to health or maybe right to livelihood or equal pay for equal work, maternity benefit, one could refer to any number of such landmark judgments. Creamy layer concept, which is right now applicable only to the other backward classes of citizens in the context of reservations in public employment and admissions into educational institutions. This has been in fact probably an exercise of judicial activism, though it is not beyond criticism. Similarly, one more very important form of judicial activism is in the form of assumption of judicial primacy in the matter of appointment and transfer of judges of the High Court and appointment of Supreme Court judges. Before 1993, it was the executive primacy in the matter of appointment of these judges. Even supersession took place. Senior most judges were not made the Chief Justices of India. There were in fact 2 instances where supersession took place, and today it is in fact the primacy of the judiciary which has ultimately led to in fact their own control in recommending the names of judges to be appointed as the judges of High Court, judges of Supreme Court, through collegium system, through memorandum of procedure which has been reached between the government and the Supreme Court collegium. This is another important aspect. The Supreme Court went to the extent of striking down the validity of the 99th Amendment, which sought to introduce National Judicial Appointments Commission to reduce the role of collegium system. So, that shows that the Supreme Court has been very active in this regard. And the other areas where judicial activism has been exhibited conspicuously is in environmental jurisprudence, prison jurisprudence, human rights jurisprudence, gender justice jurisprudence, so on and so forth. At the same time, we must also be aware of the fact that in certain cases the judiciary has gone overboard, and maybe there was a judicial overreach or overactivism. Some people called it even adventurism as far as the judicial behavior is concerned. And some of those instances could be like evolving a new writ called continuing mandamus in Jain Hawala Diaries case, that is Vineet Narayan versus Union of India 1997 Supreme Court. Similarly, where the Supreme Court set some kind of timetable to the Speaker of Bihar Legislative Assembly way back in 2006 for conducting a floor test, probably forgetting the fact that Speaker also is a constitutional authority with certain independent powers. Similarly, sometimes giving directions in those areas where the compliance is not so easy. For example, strikes by government employees, but where is the the mechanism to prevent the strikes by government employees, when the government itself is sometimes encouraging such strikes? So, that remains only on the paper. Same is the case with striking down the constitutional validity of bandhs. Bandhs definitely paralyze the social and economic life in the society, but at the same time, ever since his judgment in Bharat Kumar S. Palicha versus CPIM, the bandhs, though declared as unconstitutional by the Kerala High Court initially and confirmed by the Supreme Court subsequently, they are going on. And imagine a situation where a Bharat Bandh call was given to protest against the judgment of the Supreme Court on bandhs. This is the problem. Anyway, when we look at the judicial behavior in India, there are two schools of thought. We must remember that. One school of thought is that the judges should not cross the Lakshman Rekha. They have to remember their own limits. For example, Justice Markandeya Kaju, who was probably a conservative judge, he said in one of the cases decided by the Supreme Court in 2007, he says that in the name of judicial activism, judges cannot cross their limits and try to take over functions which belong to another organ of the state. Judges must know their limits and must not try to run the government. They must have modesty and humility and not behave like emperors. Maybe the harsh words, but the fact is that maybe in some cases the judiciary has given scope to such comments. This is the conservative point of view. But similarly, there were certain advocates as well who pursued the same line of thought, and one of them said pursuing a particular policy is in exclusive domain of the executive, and the courts must not interfere with the government's policy to ensure the right balance of power among the three organs of the state. This was the argument before the Supreme Court advanced by the Additional Solicitor General Mr. Vikas Singh in April 2008 in a particular case. This is one important aspect. But on the other hand, the other school of thought is, in fact, it is active school. They support the judicial activism. Here we may quote Justice K. G. Balakrishnan, the former Chief Justice of India, who in April 2008, almost 12 years back, he said that if the executive does not function, where will the common man go? Will he go to the chief minister? if the executive does not function, the duty is cast upon courts to mitigate their grievances. This is one important factor. So, there are two schools of thought, and there are any number of instances of judicial activism, and maybe the directions of the Supreme Court in black money case filed by late Mr. Ram Jethmalani in 2011, where the Supreme Court struck down the practice of appointing in fact special police officers in Chhattisgarh in the case of Nandini Sundar versus Chhattisgarh in 2011, or invalidating the so called forced narco analysis tests as being violative of article 20 clause 3, as was held in Selvi versus State of Karnataka. And recently we have seen the striking down of the 99th constitutional amendment in the year 2015 with regard to National Judicial Appointments Commission. The courts which followed a kind of hands off attitude in personal matters, religious matters, have come out recently. Triple Talaq judgment, Shaira Banu versus Union of India, is one case where the Supreme Court in fact struck down the practice of triple talaq, that is talaqul biddat, as unconstitutional. They brought constitutional jurisprudence into the religious jurisprudence also, because they say that constitution is the supreme law of the land. The right to privacy has been reiterated now by a larger bench as a fundamental right. Aadhar judgment is testimony to that. Same is the case with Shabarimala judgment, where in fact the Supreme Court brought the customs and religious practices within the purview of the constitution. In Indian Young Lawyers Association versus State of Kerala. Then similarly, the cases where section 377 Indian Penal Code was struck down in one particular case, that is Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India recently, unnatural sexual offences. Today there are no more offences in many cases, and there are many such judgments. And we have to understand that judicial activism is welcome in certain cases, but there are certain limits and limitations, because they have to keep in mind the possibility of enforcement of their orders and directions. They must also realize the importance and limitations of contempt power. Judges, while they are being very active, they should ensure that they are beyond any criticism. Then they must also give such directions keeping in mind the judicial accountability, that is also equally important. Then they must ensure that there must be equilibrium maintained between the legislature, executive and judiciary. Judicial activism does not mean judicial supremacy, and so there are number of issues where we see the judicial policy making also, and we have to remember that judiciary still remains an undemocratic institution. The contribution I have already mentioned, human rights jurisprudence. Today President's rule cannot be imposed just like that according to the whims and fancies of the ruling party at the center. S.R. Bommai versus Union of India 1994 Supreme Court has applied speed breakers on that. Similarly, we also have the right to education recognized as a fundamental right by the judiciary first, enacted as a fundamental right and legislative right subsequently after 93 judgment in Unnikrishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Public interest litigation we have already seen. Proactive role in the protection of environment, proactive role in ensuring that free legal aid is given to the deserving sections of the society, that is institutionalizing the legal aid. It has been the contribution of judicial activism. Now coming to the conclusion, we have to remember that the constitutional vision is supremacy of the constitution and certainly not judicial supremacy or judicial governance. This has to be realized by all the organs of the state. Neither the political organs should expect that kind of governance just to clear themselves from tricky situations. Similarly, the judges also should think that it is their duty to govern the country. It is not their duty, they have their own jurisdiction. This is one important point, and every organ of the state must respect each other, and judiciary can act only as a catalyst, that is especially when the other organs of the state are sleeping, are overstepping their limits. It should act as a catalyst, it should act as an ombudsman, a watchdog in ensuring that every organ remains within their limits and domain. So, what is the need of the hour? Need of the hour is self realization by the judiciary, some kind of self introspection, self restraint and ultimately self regulation. Judges cannot be controlled by others. They have done yeoman service in ensuring that there has been constitutional governance, there has been protection of human rights of the people. In the process, all is well that ends well, no issue about it. But at the same time, judicial activism has certainly played a constructive role in administration of justice. Dear viewers, I hope that you have enjoyed this discourse on judicial activism and its role in administration of justice in India, and we shall meet in the next class to discuss the other related aspects. Thank you.